So, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of In Conversation With. If you're joining us on Friday night over on the Azure Live Twitch.tv channel, thanks so much for tuning in. As always, please do follow, subscribe to the channel. That would be absolutely awesome. And obviously, you'll get notified when more content goes live. Equally, if you are watching this on catch up on YouTube, thanks so much for joining in. Hope you enjoy this episode. Please do like and subscribe. It really is appreciated if you could do that. Okay, so my next guest this week, he is a cloud solutions architect at Microsoft. He can be found helping the tech community across the socials with all things DevOps. And today we're going to explore the concept of developer velocity and some of the really cool new tech toys like Codespaces and Copilot. So with that being said, I would like to welcome my next guest on In Conversation With as Mr. Samuel Rowe. Hey Sam, how you doing?
I'm not too bad. How you doing?
Yeah, really good. Thanks, buddy. Yes, yeah, keep him well. But thanks so much for joining me. Thanks for sparing the time and coming and jumping on a session and talking about some cool new tech areas for me.
That's no worries at all. I think today we're going to have a lot of fun, if I'm honest.
No, absolutely.
I've been playing with some of these technologies the last couple of days, and it's been fantastic fun.
Well, look, before we jump in, feet first, as I'm sure we will in a very small second, but I don't know if you want to give yourself a little bit of a better introduction, let people know what you're up to and what you're doing with Microsoft. That would be cool.
Awesome. So, Samuel Rowe, happy for people to call me Sam. Cloud Solution Architect, as you said. I work in our innovation kind of arm inside the UK Customer Success Unit at Microsoft. Although today I'm joining us myself. I'm an avid technologist, and I'm not a great developer, but I have spent a long time working in the DevOps community, and I'm really happy to help out however I can.
No, absolutely. I know we've met a couple of times now over the last sort of year or so doing various bits and pieces, the open hacks and all the cool stuff. And I've seen a few of your talks, and they're always spot on. There's always something to learn. So, like I say, when I reached out and you said you'd join, it was really exciting because some of these technologies, like you just say there, I'm not a dev either, and some of the point of me doing these videos is to kind of help other people like me who come from that traditional operations background and maybe feel, I don't know, sometimes the way the industry's going, you feel that pressure to, shouldn't I learn some of these dev skills? Do I need to code? And it's certainly a bit of a hot topic, I think, at the moment across the industry of, and I guess people see it in different ways. But to look at some of these cool new bits, features, and technology is it kind of opens that can of worms a little bit further and lures people into the dark side of development, doesn't it, Sam?
It does indeed. It does indeed. I mean, I used to work for a software development company called Codeweavers up in Staffordshire many years ago. And it was a relatively modest-sized organisation. There was like 25, 30 people in the team, I think. Mm-hmm. And my role at the time was infrastructure engineer. But it was before really the coin DevOps had kind of come along and taken on. Yeah. And I suppose today you might have called it like a DevOps role. Yeah. So I do know where you're coming from, because a lot of that role was about making sure that developers understood what was going on from an operations perspective and trying to feed back what we needed from them. And a lot of it was also learning from the developers and leaning in on them and taking their understandings and pushing that through the environments to make sure that it was consistent.
Yeah, and I guess let's face it. I mean, I know the term DevOps has become, I guess, a bit more prominent over the last few years, certainly in the tech industry. But it's founded on principles that have been around for decades now. At the end of the day, and working practices, and you've got to relate it to that working relationship that you have with colleagues. At the end of the day, we all want the same thing, and it's cool to see that this whole DevOps culture thing now is kind of broadened across lots of different tech disciplines and trying to get us all working a little bit more in harmony. Is that the best way to put it?
So that's a really great question, if I'm honest. And I actually was talking to somebody the other day about this. They were new to the DevOps kind of culture, tools, processes, and trying to understand what it meant. And the simplest explanation I can come up with is the fact that, operations teams are stability agents. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're often there, designed and incentivized in a large way to make sure that the system stays stable, that everything's up, everything's running as it is. And the best way of staying stable is to not change anything. Yeah, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Absolutely, yep.
And on the flip side, developers are incentivized for changing things, because every new line of code is a change, and they're incentivized to make those changes. And the DevOps culture was this, in my humble opinion, is recognizing that these contradictory kind of pieces exist, and building automation and trust through collaboration and communication so that they can actually work together and are incentivized to have the common goal of enabling change to happen, but also ensuring the quality of that change.
Yeah, keeping that balance, I guess, isn't it? And doing it, like you say, in a controlled, auditable. We like to say there's no blame, and there absolutely is no blame. But I guess the point is, if something catastrophic goes wrong, then you need to improve your process, or you need to put in some additional checks and measures before that line of code gets ingested into production, I guess. And it's really cool. So I've been dabbling around the edges of those kind of DevOps technologies, that kind of help enable some of those processes. And it really is cool to see, because for me, as one of those traditional ops people, you can start to see how you can now leverage those kind of technologies to help you automate some of the stuff that you might be doing as that kind of, like you say, that SRE type role where you're trying to keep the lights switched on and working, and I guess, we're going to dip into a couple of those new technologies from Microsoft today with you, Sam. But, I've heard this term, certainly over the last couple of months, start to creep up with this whole developer velocity kind of term. Now, I mean, where do you stand with that? Does that mean anything at the minute, Sam? Is it just a marketing phrase, or where do you sit with that?
So developer velocity, there is quite a lot behind it. I'll be honest, it's quite nebulous, and I think from a technical audience perspective, it's usually a bit of a, it's a mixed bag whether people like it or not.
Yeah.
But there's lots of things it can mean to lots of different people. I actually think that it's not. I would like to have called it something different, if I'm honest, because from a developer velocity perspective, it sounds like it is just focused on developers. Sure. But it's just as you were saying, traditional ops people are now starting to write more automation scripts, more infrastructure as code, and those kind of pieces. And I think a lot of the developer velocity tooling and things around that can actually help traditional ops people accelerate their adoption of things as well.
No, I agree, and I think it's one of those things that look, we're faced with such a huge wall of technology at the moment. Everybody's learning journey is somewhat different, but at the same time, there's lots of similarities in the way that we're going. Whether you're a developer or an operations person or somebody else in the tech industry, I think we're all trying to learn these new ways. I keep using the word new, and look, they are new to me and other people like me, but equally they've been around for some time, and it really is cool and it's interesting, but equally a little bit scary. It's probably fair to say that they're kind of all coming, and it's knowing which way to go first.
Yeah, and I think developer velocity is much the same. I think the tech industry is really a cyclical industry. Lots of things come back around with a new coat in a new dress. We all it's new. And it's the same pattern as it was last time. It's just now slightly different and picked up some new pieces that makes it more, ready for the current environment that we're in. I think developer velocity is one of those things, because with developer velocity, you're thinking around how you can enable developers to write code faster, how you can enable them to get code into production quicker. Yes, there's a lot of the DevOpsy pieces. But also how you can keep them happy, how you can manage your developer retention. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. No, I'm with you.
That's a large problem with the industry as well. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Keeping developers on board and happy is a large part of what's happening because there's such a shortage of developers.
Mhm.
Yeah, that everybody gets a lot of offers to move around to other companies. Yeah, and keep them happy, keep them away from burnout is a really useful thing.
No, absolutely, and I think it's like you say. It's fair to say that's the state of our industry at the moment. You look at the tech industry, and it's kind of exploding in lots of different areas at once, and yeah, it's almost like get yourself strapped in and go along for the ride to a certain extent. But yeah, some of these technologies now. I mean, I don't know if we want to jump over and start delving into some of these things, but I mean, I'm right in thinking we're going to have a little look at Codespaces, and then we're have a little glimmer and glimpse into the world of Copilot, which I've seen a few cool videos and some little demos, but I've yet to actually dig into myself. So should we do that?
Well, let's just have a quick section just to talk about this for a moment. But I mean, Copilot, Codespaces, I think the real joy of Codespaces is that it allows you to rapidly innovate with your development team. Yeah. So from an infrastructure perspective, I was talking about working at Codeweavers. What we used to do is we used to make sure that the development teams had the same build of computers. Yeah. So that they had similar hardware and an operating system that was pushed out. So it was we use Windows deployment services to push out a version of the OS, and that was consistent between all the dev machines, and that was kept in sync with our stage integration and production web applications. Sure. So that any software the developers wrote, we knew would work in production, because if it worked on my dev machine, it was in effect the same image, the same libraries. Yeah,
sure.
As you can imagine, that's a lot of effort to go through to keep all those things in sync.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
And Codespaces allows us to, codify that in an infrastructure as code type of way. Glue it together with a couple of files inside our code repository, treat it as code, so it goes through the same software development lifecycle, change lifecycle, audit trail, etc., as you'd expect with any kind of piece of code. And then when a new developer comes along, they can get on board really quickly.
No, cool. Yeah, absolutely.
That is part of developer velocity, because suddenly when you're doing something like inner sourcing, where you are bringing on board somebody into your code repo, there's something that they don't know how to use, but they want to submit a fix to solve their problem in a different repository. If you can give them a dev environment in 2 or 3 minutes rather than a set of scripts which they need to run that will take them 2 or 3 days to get ready,
with you,
much easier to get on board and to actually be able to help the wider economy inside the business to deliver software.
So what was the general process like, in terms of, if you've got a dev environment, you've got a bunch of people sat around machines, how, what was that previous or probably still current to a certain extent with a lot of businesses? How do you keep those things up to date? When I'm assuming you've got devs installing lots of different libraries and different plugins and all sorts of stuff. So,
well, it's a great point. It really depends upon the organization. An organization that's developing with Docker, is different from an organization that's developing natively on local hardware.
Sure.
I was recently talking with a customer about using how they wanted to develop against Service Bus, and there's several different modes of doing that. And it often ends up with there being a long README of people going, do this, then make sure you've got this version of the library installed, and then do this, and set this up. And, it's a long list of manual steps that may have a few scripts to sidestep and automate some pieces to run through. But the reality is it's fragile. And, in some enterprises, especially if you look in the financial services sector where they're heavily regulated, they lock down the computer so you can't. So the list of steps you have to use are even longer and can take you to get going.
I'm with you. Yeah. So it can take. It's not just a case of somebody sat on a nice vanilla machine with local admin rights and filling their boots. It can go through a long-winded process of granting permissions and waiting for that to be approved and then install the next bit. Yeah. We get that in everyday life with normal end users. So All I can say is I probably wouldn't want to be involved at that level if it were for a team of developers. That's going to be a painful job, surely, for any ops person.
Well, no, exactly. And when I worked at Codeweavers, we took the view that we were working as a single team, and we had very high level buy-in from the managing director to make sure that happened.
Sure.
And that meant that we worked closely with them to dictate to the dev team some boundaries of what needed to be installed, and they dictated what they were their minimum requirements to actually make it work.
Got you.
And we worked closely together to do that.
But I guess that's going to be kind of an iterative process as new tech and new features, new libraries, new software even. When that gets released for devs, not being a dev myself, but I'm presuming if they're anything like most tech people, they like to try and use the new thing that's come out, or at least trial it and see what it compares like to the stuff that they're used to, and not being able to do that, I guess, in itself is a problem.
Oh, absolutely. It's another reason why Codespaces are so awesome, is because the environment's described in the code repository on the branch. If you want to go try something, you spin out a new branch, you try changing the environment through your Codespace, and you can see what the effect's going to be. And if it doesn't work, you delete the branch. If it does work, you put pull request in.
And all of these things kind of start to make sense then, provided you've, as an ops person, what Git is, what branches are within Git, what that kind of thing is. And, it's just to kind of spell that out. It's like, it's one of those elements to the whole picture, isn't it? That you kind of need to, so yes, I've been through that. I've been through a little bit of that. So I kind of get it now. I get where we're going with the whole changing of branches and doing changes. So, yeah, I mean, it's cool to understand the problem that these kind of technologies are trying to fix. And if it gets banded under this umbrella of developer velocity, I get what you mean. Sometimes it can be, you get it, move on. Other times it can be, I guess, patronizing to a certain extent to certain people, I guess, when, you're trying to blanketly cover a name to call something one thing or another. It's generally not always a good thing because, people don't relate in that manner, I guess, most of the time. But no, that makes complete sense, Sam. I get it. The way that you've explained it there, we got this age-old problem of trying to keep these machines in sync and, developers happy with actually being productive and getting on with the work that they're there to do. So, yeah, I mean, what is Codespaces then, Sam?
So, if you share my screen, let's jump over to the desktop.
There we go.
Yeah, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and create a new repo. And while I'm creating the repo, I'm going to talk around what actually Codespaces are. So,
Sam, I don't know if you can make your screen only a little bit bigger. I think that's cool. That looks good.
Right, good. Are we okay in dark mode, or do you want me to switch it to light mode?
I use dark mode. I'm absolutely fine. Yeah. It's coming through fine for me. So,
cool.
Stick with what you love, Sam.
No worries. I do know from an accessibility point of view, some people prefer dark mode, some people prefer light mode.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
But just thought I would ask the question. But yeah, what I wanted to do here is I'm going to create a new repository, and I'm going to actually start from the very beginning to show how quick it is to set up a code space. And while I'm doing that, I'm also going to discuss what actually is that code space. Okay. I'm just going to choose to use the name that they've given us. Fantastic Octo Umbrella sounds brilliant.
Nice.
And I'm going to make it a public repo. I'm going to add a quick README. I'm going to add a Python git ignore. I'm not a Python developer, but at least this will show you how bad I am at Python, but it just gives it some kind of idea.
I'm glad you're driving, Sam. That's all I can say.
Well, behind the scenes, Codespaces is effectively Visual Studio Code, but split into two parts. So you've got the developer environment run as a server running inside GitHub's estate, and you end up with the user interface of Visual Studio Code running in your web browser and passed through to you. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm with you.
Now, I'm going to create a new code space for this, and this gives you an idea of how quickly this starts up. Yeah, it does take a moment to kick in. And the documentation for Codespaces is brilliant, so I'll just quickly bring that up.
So effectively what that's doing then is it's literally taking a container image, spinning that up in the background and presenting it to you, like you say, with that Visual Studio interface.
Exactly. There's this local component. Yeah, if I zoom the screen in, there's a local component, which is the piece that's now running in my web browser, and then there's the remote component, which has got source code, terminal processing, all the rest of it, that's effectively running in a virtual machine inside GitHub.
Okay. Yeah, with you.
Yeah. Now, because this local OS component piece is disconnected, you can choose to open up Codespaces with Visual Studio Code locally.
Okay.
I'm actually, and it's relatively easy to do that. I'm going to choose not to do that today, if you don't mind, but it is easy enough to do. If we click on the little Codespace button down here, you can open in VS Code.
Sure.
And it will open it up in proper Visual Studio Code, and what that means is it's just the user interface that's running locally, and still got the whole back end piece running, out in the cloud. And just to prove that we are running somewhere else, if I go to our website, I can't type today. My apologies. My IP address right now is 82.31.114.117.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. That's it. curl.whatismyipaddress.com. And it's a different IP address.
Yeah.
We've got 13.83.9, and my IP address from my local machine is that 82, etc. address.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. That makes sense. Yeah, cool.
Cool. Are we okay to crack on?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Keep going, Sam. I think, so basically they are in completely different locations. The GitHub server is obviously accessing the internet from Microsoft data center somewhere. I mean, on that note, do you have control as to where your Codespace actually spins up from, or is that just not a thing at the minute?
So, and this is one of the reasons why this documentation is really useful.
Yeah.
Codespace is effectively VS Code wrapped up in some goodness made by GitHub. Yeah.
Okay.
So at the moment, I think it went GA from GitHub. Actually, in the last few days, it should now be GA. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I think the announcement was mid-August that it was going to go GA at the end of August. I know that there is a roadmap of lots of new features. I don't really want to comment right this second what are those features, but
yeah, I know what you mean.
But yeah, you can run VS Code with remote contained development and have a lot of these benefits on your local machine as well.
Okay,
so when we add these dev container files in a second to customize the environment that we're going to be running in, you can use those same container files to actually run inside a dev container on your local host, as long as you've got Docker running. Yeah.
Interesting. I'm with you.
And unfortunately, I'm on my Mac today. My little Mac Mini's only got 8 gig of RAM, so it doesn't run Docker particularly well. But otherwise, I will show you that as well.
But you can bring that, like you say, you can bring that down to your local machine and run this completely in your own container environment, basically.
Yeah. And still got a lot of the advantages of it being developed as code. So your environment specification is inside this dev container JSON file.
Yeah, okay.
If we just go on to that, because I think that's a brilliant feature that's come out, is part of dev containers now. If I have a look in here and I look at Python, we have got Python installed, exit, brilliant. But we don't have functions installed, Azure functions.
Okay.
So if I run functions, we don't get anything. Yeah. Now I want to add Azure functions in here, and I want to add Azure functions with Python development. And this is one of the really cool new features. A few months ago, I think back end of last year, beginning of this year, you used to have to go to a repository and go and look for the dev container JSON file, the dev container Docker file that you needed as a base for what you wanted to do. And now they've added this in. So we can just open up the command palette, and start writing Codespace. Mm-hmm. And we can add a development container configuration files. And when we click that through, it's now going to ask us what we want to do. And we don't want an LP. Ubuntu, we want to show all definitions. And then we can do start typing functions.
Okay.
Find the Python 3 set, add that in, and this then adds in our dev container JSON file and our Docker file.
Right. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Now our dev container JSON file, goes through the main kind of pieces. So the first part here is that it's telling us which Docker file it's going to be based upon, because in effect it uses a development container running on the Codespaces VM in the back end.
Okay.
It shows which forwarded port's going to be port forwarded through. Now, there's some magic goes on with Codespace where it actually creates a reverse proxy and a private website that's authenticated with your GitHub credentials that then gets proxied through to that particular port on the dev container.
Right.
Yeah. So you can still like start running stuff, and we'll show that in a minute. It's really cool. Yeah. And then there's this section of being able to add extensions in. Now, because we want to look at Codespaces in a minute, I'm going to add the extension for Codespaces. Copilot.
Copilot, yeah.
And the way to do that is you find the extension ID. So if we go into the extensions list and we look for Copilot, we can see that the Copilot ID is this identifier here.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, github.copilot. And then in our dev container JSON file, we just add that on as another line.
Okay, yeah.
And as you can see, it wasn't installed a moment ago, but I've now added it to that list. And if we have a quick look at the Docker file, I think the Docker file is pretty simple for this one. It's just that it's going to be pulling the Azure Functions Python 3 core tools container.
Yeah,
and that's what it's going to be based upon. But because this is a standard Docker file, you can extend it. So if you needed to install PCs or do anything else, you can run your normal kind of run commands, etc. in there.
With you. So yeah, so like you say, it's a standard Docker file. You can add all of those extra commands in that file and run it exactly the same way as you would in Docker Desktop or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's nothing stopping you from using any Docker file you want, and any container you want. So, there wouldn't be anything from stopping us from creating one specifically that uses, say, the Azure Shell Docker container. Yeah.
Okay.
So you've got the Azure Shell tool set installed, and then put up your own kind of layers if you wanted to be doing something like Terraform development or something like that. Yeah. And then pinning in the version by always doing a get for the right version of Terraform.
So, I mean, for me as an ops guy, and certainly the things that I've learned over the last sort of 18 months, 2 years, I guess, is, we touched on Git earlier on about that sort of source control and that sort of checking in of code. And that code doesn't have to just be, software development kind of code. It could be, like you say, infrastructure as code with Terraform or Bicep or ARM and things like Docker files. So this is now another one of those little areas where you're kind of stringing together these little concepts of Docker files and containerization. And I'm speaking openly here in that, to me, clearly this is spinning up that container on a Microsoft server in GitHub that is effectively running something like Kubernetes or something of that type, I'm imagining, behind the scenes. And hence what you're saying is that we can use any kind of Docker file. It's just going to run a container to your specifications.
Yeah, to a large degree. I mean, I haven't got an example of it today, but I've seen development teams choose to use, quite complicated kind of setups here with multiple containers running with networking set up between them, so that you can mimic your whole, a miniature development environment inside Codespaces.
Well, yeah, okay. So kind of do that kind of integration testing and stuff like that between, I guess, what databases and other applications that are in different containers. Is it that kind of deal? I'm assuming, is it?
So it's like a halfway house, but it definitely would require communication with the operations team to understand what that looks like in in the production and the stage environment, so that you can bring that understanding back into the development environments.
Cool. Yeah, I get it. No, it's great as you talk through these things and you can see these things actually in the concept of using this within something like Codespaces, it's like, right, okay, all of these things start to fit into place, I guess, don't they? These pieces of the jigsaw start fitting together a bit neater, I guess.
Absolutely. So what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to add those files to my Git repo, because we were just talking around Git. For those that haven't seen Visual Studio Code's Git integration, especially when you're running it inside Codespaces, it set up all the authentication piece behind the scenes for us. So we don't need to go.
Sam, you just opened up that Codespace from within that new GitHub repo that you created, and it's opened up the Codespace with the repo that you were just in then, basically. Cool. Okay.
If I do an LS, LAH in there, we can see the Git license, the README, etc. in there. And if I look at the files itself, those are the fields that we put into it for fantastic Octo umbrella.
Cool. Yeah, with you. Nope.
And what I'm going to do is, because it will take a moment to rebuild the container in a second, if we go to the source control activity on the left-hand side and we add those files in, and we've just put in a note that we've added dev container. So we add that in, and then I'm just going to sync my repository back, doing a push-pull sync back up to GitHub. Yeah. And what that's doing is basically my code space has got a set of code on it. When I sync it, I'm syncing it up with the GitHub repository itself. Yeah.
Okay.
Because Git being a distributed version control system, there's what you've got in whatever environment you're looking at is not necessarily the same as what's on the GitHub server or wherever your code's kind of synchronized up to until you do that push-pull sync. Yeah.
Right.
So,
okay. I've got you.
Yeah. I mean, quite often you find people do a Git pull and then a Git push, but it's not a huge amount of difference between just doing a Git sync in Visual Studio Code.
Okay. No, I'm following. Yeah, that makes sense.
So now, if we just rebuild this container, so again, we'll do the code space, rebuild container this time. And while it's doing that, because that's now going to go and read that Docker file and read that JSON file, and it's going to go through all of those different pieces and do the things that we needed in the background. And when it comes up, we'll find that we've got Copilot installed and the Azure Functions toolset installed. Just while that's building, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back to the code repository, and we can see that dev container JSON file has been added to the repo. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, with you.
I admit I'm not using good practices of multiple branches right this second. I'm just using a main branch. There's only me running in here.
Yeah.
But it's worth kind of just mentioning that's going on.
Yeah. No. Yeah. For demo purposes only.
Yeah, for demo purposes only. But this takes a moment to build up, and this time it's going to take a little bit longer because it's got to pull the new code space container. Because we're using a different one. It's not one of the synced ones normally on this one. So it takes a little bit longer.
Okay. So there are also a bunch of containers then that are there readily available to, because what are these? A couple 100 meg in file size, I'm guessing, something like that for the container. So behind the scenes then that was probably downloading, was it?
Yeah, it was just synchronizing all the files into the right place and making sure everything's kind of set up. If you've got a lot of changes, a lot of customizations in your Docker file, it can take a little bit longer. But
sure.
If I think about my time at other organizations where actually, setting up a development environment can literally take days or weeks to get a developer on board. The fact that this takes a couple of minutes, and if you've got a really big one, I think GitHub themselves did a blog post on this the other day that they've managed to get it down to 15 minutes, and they've got a 30 gig database or something, 30 gig of source code. Yeah. Yeah,
it's chalk and cheese in contrast, isn't it? I guess from, like you say, a few days to set up an environment to 15 minutes or so is no great shakes, is it really?
Yeah, and that's the important bit. It's about being able to get developers on board and into the code, start making changes, and really show, add value to it quickly.
No, absolutely. It makes perfect sense what you've done. So you've modified that Docker file, checked that in, synchronized your Git, rebuilt your container. Boom, you're now in Codespaces with those extensions pre-installed for you.
Yeah, and if I go to the extensions list, we can now see that this has if I go we've got Copilot installed.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Although it's not signed in for some reason. Access. There we go. Got to allow that, otherwise it won't actually do its thing. And Copilot, in the Copilot at the moment is still in beta. Yeah,
Sure.
it's a closed beta. It's not a final product, and it does some really amazing things. But we'll get onto that in a minute. But if we now look at actually what's installed on here, remember I did a Funk before to show Azure Functions. Now we have Azure Functions ready to rock and roll.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know whether you're going to follow the instructions for installing Azure Functions, but it's only a couple of lines of script, but it isn't instant. Let's put it like that.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. So this is pre-baked into that particular container that Microsoft have made available through GitHub that you can just leverage in your Docker file. It's there pre-canned, already installed is what we're doing. When you wrote that line, well, actually, when you grabbed the Docker image, the container image, that's what you were saying. And all you've done then is you've added the extension in with that list that you typed in where the Copilot, you added Copilot, yeah? Exactly.
Right. And the one of the big things of this, and then, come back to that developer and operations kind of piece again, it just ensures consistency, because you're not starting out with a laptop with an unknown version of Windows running on it, or something like that. You're starting with the point that this is the same development container that everybody uses to develop from,
and it's defined in code. Effectively, it's defined in code. So it
you just go
sense.
Same life cycle as everything else does, and it can form part of the same kind of life cycle to going into production and making sure that your production environments, if they're Dockerized as well, use the same base Docker containers, or not necessarily the SDK variants, but the runtime variants of the same Docker containers.
So I've seen that with Docker, where you would use that kind of SDK container image to kind of build your project or build your solution, but then it would run actually in a nice clean container image that wouldn't have all those SDK files. Effectively, that's what you're saying, isn't it? Is that, and you can do that with Docker, from my recollection of my learnings. Not that I'm a Docker expert, but those kind of principles that your container image, you kind of want to keep as clean and neat and tidy as possible, I'm assuming. Not to bloat.
The production ones, absolutely, because the smaller they are, the faster they can spin up. The closer they are to the original, the more likely they are to be cached locally as well. So something like app service, the .NET 6 runtime will be cached on the physical host, whereas if you've got like 20 steps of configuration after that point, it will have to get the cached version and then go through and set up the deviations for me.
With you.
So there's a lot of things there to think about, but the joy is that it's breaking down it runs on my machine, you're using the same environment, So
literally that term, it ran on my machine, is true, and that's great, because now everybody can use that same machine in effect, because you've got it in code. That's it's when you break things down this way, it just seems so obvious, doesn't it? And you think, why wasn't that a thing, or why hasn't this been a thing for a long time? But the wonders of technology, eh?
The wonders of technology. So the next step, I've created a new functions directory, and if I change directory into functions, and I apologize, I can't type today, and I do a func new.
It's because I'm watching you and there's a camera on, Sam. You know the deal.
So I'm going to start a new function here, and because it's new, it's going to ask me what worker runtime I want. I'm going to use Python, as I said. It's going to then create all of my folders and other kind of pieces. We're going to put in a new HTTP trigger. I'm going to call this trigger demo1. If we open up this functions folder, we can see demo1 there. and I've got an init .py file, which is kind of like the root of my Azure function, that we put. And just to show that proxy piece that I mentioned earlier on, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do func start, and it's going to run that function and give me this demo API here. I can open that up in my browser by clicking on it, and it goes through, proxies through, and you can see we've got this lovely URL, Sam Rowe, umbrella, blah, blah, blah. It's using HTTPS, so it's actually encrypted. And if I try to open up that URL from a private browser window, you'll see, and this is one of the brilliant things, that gives me a login screen for GitHub.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Now behind the scenes.
Okay. Yeah.
Behind the
scenes. I'm following. I think I know what you're going to say now, but it's like, yeah, okay, that's cool.
Behind the scenes, it's just kind of seamlessly proxied that back through to my dev container, and we can see that that's come through and executed the function, from the logs. Yeah. Now, the best bit there is if we go to the ports tab, we could make that a public port.
Okay, right, yeah.
If you need to share it with somebody, you can make it public. You could make it a HTTP protocol if you needed to, or rather than HTTPS. Yeah.
Okay, so by default it's locked down. You would have had to, because you were in private, you'd have had to log in with your GitHub, and I'm presuming it would have just logged in and run the query in that in private session then, if you'd have logged in. But so the point is, it is all secure by default then.
Yes, that's exactly the point. By default, you're not, even though you're developing not on your machine, it's still only you that can access your development environment.
With you. Yes, completely with you.
Cool. Because that's one of the first things I get asked most of the time is, how do I run this locally rather than in Codespace? Because I want to keep it, inside my control. And this way you go, well, actually, you're still running it. You're getting the advantages of the capacity of GitHub here to run this. All of it, lovely kind of integration with the Git repo, so you don't have to keep signing in, etc. But at the same time, you still got, a significant amount of security running, because everything between you and it is encrypted and is private by default. Yeah,
absolutely. That makes sense. But you can open that up, like you say, should you wish to.
Yeah, and that can be useful. I did this with a friend of mine the other day. I wanted to just show him the results of a particular API I was working on. So I temporarily made it public. He sent him the URL. He came back, tried it, and then I made it private again. Jobs are good.
With you. Yeah. No, that's cool. No, that's really good to see. Awesome.
Yeah. Now, if we go back to the terminal a second, one of the joys of running Python for functions is, as I make changes here, it's an interpreted language. So at the end of the day, anything I make a change to here actually happens in real time. So we do occasionally get red lines if I put in a syntax error deliberately. That could cause me some problems.
Yeah.
Now, what I wanted to do at this point, if you don't mind, just have a quick look at some of the Copilot features, because I think Copilot's where some of the joy is with this.
Well, yeah. I mean, this is clearly, when did it go out into preview? It was a good month or two ago now, wasn't it? Probably about 6 weeks, 8 weeks ago, maybe. And it looks pretty cool, Sam. It does look quite futuristic, and again, it's one of those things that how far is this going to go? But yeah, let's jump in. It'd be cool to see, to be honest, Sam. Like I said, I've seen some of the videos before, but yeah, this will be awesome now.
So it's probably just worth level setting for a moment with what Copilot's doing here. So behind the scenes, GitHub's leveraging the GPT-3 model. I think it's the GPT-3 and not GPT-2, but they're leveraging an AI model that understands English language and has read lots of open source software.
Yeah.
It reads your comments, it reads your code as you're writing it, and it tries to generate new code based upon that learning set of all of the public open source code that's been written.
Okay, right, sure.
Now, it is, as you say, it is in closed beta at the moment. I'm very lucky I've been given access to Copilot. I think is absolutely brilliant tool. I do have a problem at the moment. It's not showing up in my thing. There we go. You've got Copilot running because you've got this little Copilot icon. It's really hard to see.
I know,
That's
I see there.
Only way of telling that it's running at the time. Before it starts offering you suggestions. But the really important thing to remember is, in my humble opinion, Copilot is like IntelliSense plus. Yeah.
Yeah, sure thing. Yeah.
It's brilliant at exploring code and exploring how to do things with libraries you don't necessarily know how to use. Okay. It's brilliant at doing some of the boilerplate pieces. You do have to read what it's written for you and try and pick apart whether it's doing exactly what you wanted or it's doing something different.
Okay, so it's kind of using that AI and that machine learning to dig into all those functions and understand actually what they're doing and relate that to kind of everyday language. Because, in the small amount of dev work that I've done in the past, it's been you browse over to kind of the library or the class and you expand it and look at the functions and methods and kind of try and find something that the name looks like it's doing what you might need it to do and test it out. And am I right in thinking that, Sam? So it's kind of stopping you having to delve into that kind of detail. Well, hopefully stopping you having to dig into that kind of detail.
Well, you still have to kind of dig into it, but it's a case of it can accelerate you. So rather than having to go and spend a couple of hours reading the docs to get started, you can kind of tell Copilot, this is what I want to achieve, and it will write something, and then you kind of go in and check in its work, if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense, yeah.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do here then is, I think, a really useful starting point. There's a website called Carbon Intensity, which if you've ever come across it, thoroughly recommend it. It shows you the amount of CO2 that's currently being produced in the UK. But there is an API off the back end of this that you can go and use, query.
Yeah,
and
okay.
Free to use. You can go and use it and go and get whatever you want. So if I go for the generation mix, you just need to do that as the request. Yeah.
Okay.
I've just copied that onto my clipboard. Yeah. And I just wanted to have a free API which I can go and query. Yeah.
Sure.
I mean,
okay. Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah.
There's plenty here. I mean, I could have gone and got cat facts or pictures of dogs or anything, but I'm choosing this one because it's one that's a bit close to home recently with the stuff that's going on. So I'm going to remove all of this code that comes out of the box with it, and I am going to write a comment that says, get the current generation mix from the carbon intensity API and you see I've pasted it onto the end of my thing, onto the end of that comment. All I've done is I've written a comment. Yeah,
I'm with you.
In another comment and return the data as a JSON. Okay.
So that's Copilot is actually giving that ghost as well, is it, as you're typing?
So as I'm typing, it's trying to understand and predict what I'm going to write next as my English language kind of text.
Yeah, okay.
Now, I know one thing I need to do here is I need to import requests because, and I might need to install requests. And the reason that's what I'm doing there is I need to do, my apologies, I've skipped a step.
Is that because you're kind of requesting an API endpoint for information, is it? Yeah.
Yeah. So the library here is the request library that I'm going to run. And the request library, it's pretty much, it's the standard, it's the way that I generally use to request APIs, other kind of websites and other things as a Python kind of library.
Yeah, with you.
It's relatively easy to use. So If I now put a new line on there, it's going to write for me, and you can see it's ghosted it. And when I press tab, it has a crack at it. And then if I put in, just keep going tab.
Wow. Okay.
It's written me that code. And if I go to our API again and I just refresh the page.
My goodness. Okay. So it's bad request, but okay.
I obviously didn't choose a particularly good part of the API to pick from. I've got to generate. I wanted generation mix. Let's go for England. Let's do that instead.
Yeah, okay.
Because I'm pretty sure that one's going to work. And I'm just going to change my code. We will refresh that page. I've got that.
Yeah.
Go through.
It's like magic, isn't it?
I haven't had to learn how to use the request library at this point. Yeah, I've had to know that that's the library I need to use. Yeah,
sure thing. Yeah,
but I haven't had to do anything with it. Yeah.
Now, pick the appropriate functions for you. I mean, you know, is it digging in real time into that API and looking around itself, or is it just something? I mean, do you know any of that? What it's doing, or is it just magic, Sam?
Well, was it Isaac Asimov that wrote, you know, any sufficiently advanced technology looks like magic. Yeah,
exactly.
I know it's using the OpenAI model to do this, and I know that model's been trained with a lot of open source software. So choosing a library like Requests, which is used significantly in the open source community, gives me an advantage here. Yeah. I know that every character I type is going to that model, as I write it. And there are, you know, I'm not going to get into the debate today, but there are a lot of debates about actually, you know, what the source code is producing, what the license should be on it, and also the rights of the owners of the source code that it's been trained upon. Let's not get into that today, because it is amazing that it can do this.
Yes, yeah, no, absolutely.
But from a learning perspective, and I think this is one of the reasons I'm so excited about Copilot, is that we can do some really cool stuff here about just having a go and playing and looking and seeing what we can achieve with it. So if we start to choose to split this down, so at the moment our response is a generation mix, and inside the generation mix we've got a data object. And inside the data object, we've got an array of regions and times and other kind of interesting pieces, but we've also got a generation mix there. So I think if we do a data generation mix on this, we should be able to just get out that one bit. Data key from the JSON object. And it's going to suggest we return that as a function. So I can get rid of that line because I don't need two returns. And if I rerun the page now, we got an error.
Of course it's not working. It's always the way, isn't it?
Love it when we get errors. Result failure.
It got a list of objects back in that generation mix data. Well, the return is it?
Yeah, but we should then be able to do a string. Get the data key from the JSON object, return the JSON object as a string via HTTP response. Let's see what that does. So as I say, it's a bit like IntelliSense plus plus plus. You still need to read the error code, have a quick idea of what that means. Yeah, give it a go.
Yeah. Okay. No, with you.
Yeah. So
I mean,
what I'm going to do?
I mean that's impressive. In it, just looking at that now, it's just like you say. You read that error code, just wrote it as a comment, and it's giving you another suggestion in terms of actually try this.
Yeah.
And like you say, you can dig into that and understand actually, is that doing the right thing for me? Is that actually getting me the data that I actually need? You can dig into that afterwards once you know that you're. 1 sec, let me refresh that.
No worries.
But that is mightily impressive there, Sam. Yeah.
And it allows us to quickly kind of iterate through this and just explore what we're capable of doing.
Mm-hmm.
And
absolutely.
I think as somebody who I know enough Python to get by, and I could write this from scratch if I needed to, with enough time. Yeah, I can write pretty much anything I want with Python if I need enough time. But as an from my ops background, I used to write a lot of Python scripts to do testing of different systems to make sure different things were in the right place, backup scripts, all those kind of different things.
Yeah, sure.
This is going to help me out. Yeah, when this goes out and becomes available to everybody, this is going to help me out because suddenly I can accelerate that automation piece. This is going to free me up to think about the higher order, the higher value things that I can do.
And I guess over time, Sam, this is only going to get more and more precise, I presume, as it gets out of beta and it gets broader. And like you say, there's more stuff that goes into kind of open source community that it can learn from. There's only one way that this can go. Either it's going to get extremely complicated and you're going to get a list of hundreds of things that you can choose from, or it's just going to get really precise. I mean, it's quite interesting and this is probably about the 4th or 5th video that I've done where AI has kind of come up with how it's actually helping people, and it kind of seems to be that AI is always there at the heart somewhere at the moment, isn't it?
It's definitely in that phase of technology adoption where it's really starting to impact the day-to-day things that we do. So absolutely. This is only possible because of the work OpenAI have done. Their model is incredibly complex. It's got literally, it's been trained on so much information. It's been trained on how to read human language, in English at least, to be able to understand it and then make decisions upon that to write code and generate new things. I think it's fascinating how good it is. I love the Copilot integration. I do think that as a developer, from a developer perspective, it needs to be recognized that this isn't going to do people's jobs for them. As you saw, I still needed to import the requests at the beginning. I still needed to understand, I haven't used a pipenv here, but, I'd need to maintain my environment so that it's recorded as well if I wanted to do this properly. Yeah,
with you. Yeah, so there's still those elements. This is purely around helping somebody get that kickstart off the ground with writing something in a specific language for something that they may not be 100% familiar with, that particular library that they're using, I guess. So
exactly,
it's cool to see. I mean, it's really cool to say. Like I say, as a non-developer, in my day job, like you, I dabble around the edges and know enough to be dangerous is the good saying that I always kind of throw out there. But this is enabling me to be even more dangerous than I currently am, Sam. So
exactly.
So have we got any word yet as to when, or is it like when this is going to come out in GA? Is there any kind of timeline, or is that still kind of under wraps at the moment and not known?
So that one's seriously under wraps at the moment, if I'm honest. I can't really say much about when it would come, but I wouldn't expect it anytime soon. There's a lot of work going on behind the scenes, and if we think about the fact that Codespaces had a gestation period of going on for the best part of a year at least.
And you said this is in a private preview at the moment, so this isn't something that anybody can kind of sign up for and get on board with. This is kind of scoped to a certain subset of the tech community at the moment, I'm presuming.
Anybody can go and sign up. I just do not know the rules of who got access.
Right. Fair enough.
I think at the moment it's much more of a case of, ask and maybe you'll get.
Yeah, no. Well, yeah, absolutely. I'm not, like we were talking about this just before we recorded, weren't we, Sam? In terms of, personally, I'm not one of those people that jump straight on with the bandwagon, day one, and I'm happy to wait. But this is awesome tech. I mean, have you got anything else to show now, Sam, on that little demo there, or should we jump back to the? Go on,
so
Sam.
What's probably a good one here? So let's just take this one step further, and if we take out a couple of shortcuts here, because I that data set, I wanted the generation mix is going to give me an array, and I want the first item in that array. That should then get rid of the array around the outside. I then want to get the generation mix out of it because I want this array here.
Okay.
Yeah, and you'll see where I'm coming from in a second. Hopefully, he says. Why didn't it like that? It's another data and then a generation mix. Is it data? No, it should be generation mix. So what I'm trying to do here is I wanted to get that generation mix array out because I want to then try and use find a way of creating a pie chart out of it.
Yeah.
In effect. Yeah, I thought that'd be quite a nice thing because it's it's relatively simple data. Let's see whether it knows how to do it. And then if I copy that, put that into my return, we'll see whether that just comes back out. Nope. Doesn't like that. So here's another really cool feature which I've seen before then. Yeah, and some of this is kind of trial and error, if I'm honest. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that whole array in. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to put in a, wrong button. I'm put in a comment that says where the JSON object looks like. So I've seen an example before where you can give it an example in your comment, and that gives it context to understand what's going on.
Mm-hmm. I got you.
But it doesn't look like it's going to let me do that.
I mean, that's all right. It's not a problem, Sam. I mean, at the end of the day, just the whole concept around, you type some comments in there, it'll give you an example of actually, what kind of code you can use. And, coding, this is, typical of my experience with coding, is that it is a trial and error kind of thing. And I guess, look, there's probably developers watching this now going, oh, you've missed the comma, or it is something obvious and basic there, isn't there? But no, I get it. It's really an impressive feature that, I mean, like you say, hopefully we can start to use. I mean, certainly this is going to help a lot of people like me. It's going to help people like me. Whether or not it helps developers, I'm guessing it obviously will, and they'll be able to use this in their day-to-day working. But certainly people that maybe aren't full-time developers, this is going to offer that leg up, isn't it?
Absolutely. The way I see it is that this is a way of creating that bridge between the tech pro and the pro developer. Yeah,
Sure.
the
Sure.
tech pro being the person that spends a lot of time with technology, spends a lot of time kind of shaping their lives around themselves, that know how to do a bit of scripting, know how to do a bit of Python, a bit of C# or whatever it is, but actually want to take it to that next level, but don't have the time, or the or even the inclination, if I'm honest, to become a professional developer, but they want to achieve some of those results.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
By using a tool like this, by using Copilot, what we're doing is we're trying to bridge that gap and allow people to take it to the next level. Now, I don't know whether Copilot can do Terraform and Bicep and ARM yet, but I know that it can do a lot of different languages. I've just chosen Python today because it's the one that I've been messing around with over the last weekend. But I know it's pretty good. It's pretty good with C# and Node.js as well.
Awesome, Sam. Yeah, I mean, it's really good. It's great to see it kind of in action and kind of how you interact with this today. And like you say, this is in private preview, so I'm guessing by the time it gets that GA, I'm sure there will be other bells and whistles and features and things that will help us all a lot more than it currently is at the moment.
Yeah, and if you don't mind me just messing around for a second, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to capture that array. Yeah. And I'm going to put in here create a dictionary. It's just having a crack at it.
It's getting a bit deeper now, Sam.
Yeah. But that won't work, unfortunately, because it's trying to read that data. I suppose it might even work. No, still not work. But I give up for a moment. But what I wanted to do was actually then, because once you've got a dictionary, you can then start talking around doing other things where you can go create a pie chart from the generation mixed data, and then
I'm with you.
It's giving me interesting.
Yeah.
It's offering to do it in one particular way. Now, I'm pretty sure that there's a W3C schools one using Matplot or something like that.
Right, okay.
Yeah. So again, this is a case of, as a developer, having had a quick nose around at something like this, I want to try and use that library.
Okay, yeah.
Then see whether it can have a crack at it.
Wow, yeah. So.
And then once you've got that, you can, I mean, my data's broken, but, you would then return.
So you can actually return the image rather than the data and then using that data in something else. But yes, like you say, you're down to what are you actually going to use this function for, isn't it? So
yeah. And
oh wow, okay, yeah.
Just let it have a crack.
Within sort of 30 seconds you've written what possibly could have taken a little while to just figure out various bits and pieces of those particular that matplotlib.py, what is it, pyplot, yeah.
So just picking up from that error, I recognize that it hasn't quite generated exactly what we were expecting, but it's given us a good start, a good stab at making sure we got this matplotlib being imported in and trying to generate us a pie chart. Now, it hasn't quite worked as we expected, and you may have noticed I've changed hoodie and had a quick think about this one. The reason is I'm not quite extracting out the array properly. So if I put in the array into there, then our generation mixed data variable is actually going to have the correct thing in. Now this dictionary then extracts out all of those different pieces. Yeah, so that'll actually give us the right answer. But then we need to just see how this works. And I'm going to leave it as it is for the moment. And if we run that again, we get another error. This time it's telling me it's got no attribute to get blob to bytes, which is interesting. So it's obviously understood that the HTTP response is expecting either a string or a byte array as a return. And then it would do a content return type header of an image PNG.
Okay.
Now, if it's expecting a byte array to be able to come out, then let's try, instead of returning the image as a response, let's try doing this instead. We will, okay, so read /tmp generation mix. You see, it's already kind of jumping.
Okay, yeah, it's trying to, right, so you're transferring the image into a byte array rather than an image /png. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And then create a response object and return the image. There we go.
Okay.
We don't have any other headers that we want to set at this point, so we'll just save that. It's restarted the worker process because it's been hot reloading as we've been going along here. And then when we run that, it gives us a different error.
Unexpected keyword argument.
Content type. Right. So it doesn't like content type.
Okay.
So let's change that slightly. Create a key response object to return the image with the correct MIME type header set. No, I don't think that's what we want either. Header set for the image type. The joy of this is you can ask it the same question twice and get different answers.
Yeah, but it's cool to see that you can type these kind of comments in, and like you say, you get those little prompts and those nudges to give you something to explore. Like you say, working through the errors as you go. So unless you're a seasoned veteran with a particular kind of library or language, then you're kind of feeling your way through, aren't you?
But yeah, that's exactly it. It's I don't think that that's quite right either. I've got a feeling that HTTP response is expecting a header that says what it is and not.
Oh, but there we go. Wow, yeah. I mean, it's great to see. Like, I know we said at the beginning that the point of this is not to have a nice glossy finished demonstration just to show you something from start to finish and it all working perfectly. I mean, the point is to show those errors, to show if you're not too familiar with what you're trying to do, you're getting those prompts, you're getting those nudges, and yeah, with a few errors, things popping up. You know, it's not that it's spitting out perfect code for you, I guess, is the point, but it's giving you that kind of awareness that try this, maybe try that, and it's pointing you in the right directions. Is that pretty much where we're at, Sam, with Copilot? Yeah,
Absolutely. It's IntelliSense plus 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 plus. You know,
yeah.
It's obviously, you know, been trained on that data set of other people using the library, so it's got enough understanding of the libraries to be able to give you a steer. So I didn't think that the MIME type would be the right solution there, but obviously it's kind of pulled that together and it's understood that it could be MIME type. I was expecting it to tell me a header instead.
Yeah, but I guess the point is you've got that code now. You know, it's something now. You know, it's working. It's giving you that image that you've just described in an Azure function. You can now go back and look at that code and break it down and think, okay, I've got it working. Not 100% sure why, but at least you can analyze what it's just prompted you for now. And, you know, this is aiding with the learnings as well, like anything, isn't it? You go back and retrospectively work out, right, okay, this is why that is now working, which is a better place to be than just stumped looking at an empty screen, I guess, isn't it?
Absolutely. And you know, from a rapid development perspective, especially if you're doing something like prototypes, being able to see that, get it to give you a nudge, point you in the right direction, have a go with it, move through, I think it's awesome. I think it really is awesome.
So, I mean, Sam, we've covered off a considerable amount, to be honest. Like I was saying earlier on, you know, normally with these videos, they aim for a good 45 minutes, but this has been brilliant to talk through. So, you know, obviously looking at things like, you know, digging into Codespaces first and foremost, setting up that repo, getting that Codespace environment set up, looking at how you can change the container of that Codespace to introduce different elements, different libraries, different extensions as part of that Visual Studio experience, and then moving into showing a little bit around Copilot now and the future of, you know, how these technologies are helping developers or you know, newbie developers, seasoned veterans in development, you know, and other areas. I think it's probably fair to say, like we were talking before about that traditional operations. I'm guessing as soon as more and more languages and training sets are implemented, things like Terraform and Bicep and ARM, you know, in all fairness, some of those languages and frameworks and contexts are relatively human readable and obvious to a point, but still, you know, if you're starting off with these things and you're able to say, you know, in Terraform, you know, spin me up 2 VMs with this disk array on this VNet with this address space, and you know, you can kind of type that in human readable form.
Yeah,
you can kind of see where this is going to go, I'm guessing, you know. So I mean,
absolutely.
That's great. I mean, we'll let's fly back over to our 2 screen and let's wrap up what we've been through then, Sam.
No worries.
So, yeah, I mean, where do you think we're going with this then, Sam, in terms of actually, you know, all this new tech? You know, one of the questions I tend to ask my guests on this show is why are we doing all this? What's next? Where is this going? And for what purpose? I mean, what's your view on that?
You know, lots of this technology is around increasing the velocity for developers, but increasing velocity for all tech professionals. Yeah, it's kind of bridging that gap between the IT pro and the professional developer, the person that you know has got their fingers in lots of different pieces, a lot of breadth of knowledge, it's got a lot of business understanding, business acumen, that wants to be able to enrich the value chain in the business, but doesn't want to or have the inclination or the time to become a full stack developer, for example.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, this kind of bridges that gap. I know I think Satya coined the term the citizen developer for low code solutions, and then this is a next step forward as well, if you ask me. And I think if you take this to its you know, if I put my futurologist hat on, I think the next steps after this, once a Copilot has become, you know, much more fully featured and robust, etc., and gone GA, I can see us working towards conversational programming as well, where you talk to your Alexa, your Cortana, your Siri, and you actually start telling her, you know, this is what I want you to achieve, and she just writes the code behind the scenes.
Can you imagine? I mean, you know, I say that with a wry smile, and in certain respects, it is that kind of future wry smile. I can't believe it, but on the other hand, it's kind of pretty much honest now. It's not without the, it's not with, outside of the realms of expectation, I guess, is it, right now today? And that's why, I'm probably sat here chuckling a bit, because you think, my God, you watch all these future films as a kid and growing up, and then all of a sudden you're kind of living through it right now, and it's pretty cool. I think it's probably the best way to describe it. But like I mentioned earlier, somewhat scary and concerning in some way as well, isn't it?
Well, absolutely. I completely understand where you're coming from, but it isn't a huge step to say from where we are to going, Copilot, write me a bicep file that builds me a Cosmos DB and an app service and a couple of functions in there, and then the code for the app functions. I want you to create me a CRUD, a create, read, update, and delete REST API for my Cosmos database, and this is the shape I want the Cosmos database to be. What the schema to be, and then it's not a large leap to see from what we've done today to getting to there. And if you can say that out loud, and it can understand it, and then start coding it, it's not a huge leap. We're not far away from this.
No, absolutely. I mean, we hear all about it. I mean, taking, the slightly tongue-in-cheek view of AI and the way things are gone. But equally, when you hear these things out in public, in general society, or even news where, robots have reprogrammed themselves. I think there was an article not too long ago, actually, that they had some robotics firm had some issues with robots actually doing some damage to humans, and you think, okay, this, all of a sudden we're living in that kind of film Terminator kind of, realm where you think, it's a film at the minute, but actually you could, like you say, it doesn't take too much more of the imagination to realize where some of this technology could end up, which is why I say, in some respects it's slightly scary, but super interesting and cool to be kind of living through it today. So, I mean, Sam, it's been great having you on this show, talking through some of these things, and certainly from the perspective of where technology is going for helping developers and, like you say, IT professionals kind of bridge those gaps between each other's worlds to a certain extent. But thanks so much for joining me. It's been very, very insightful, and I look forward to kind of jumping in and trying to fathom my way around some of these technologies when they do go GA. But thank you, Sam. It's been great.
Thank you, John. I really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure.
No, anytime at all. And thanks again. We'll catch up fairly soon. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you.